Hello again, everyone. This is Steve Kallas, speaking of sports, and I'm here with Johnnie Kallas, and we're going to do an NFL preview of Wild Card Weekend. We're going to talk specifically about a few games, and then we'll give you probably a Super Bowl prediction for what we think is going to happen at the end of this next month. So, Johnnie, good to be with you. The first game we're going to talk about is at Buffalo against the New England Patriots. You know, the two battles they had this year, kind of virtually both weird games, especially the first, but it's going to be like 2 degrees, as you know, and I think it'll be closer to the crazy wind snow game than it will be about the game in New England. What are your thoughts?
Thanks, Steve. Great to be with you as always. Yeah, it's fascinating because the Patriots Bills, not only have they already obviously played twice this year, they'll be playing for their third time in under a month and a half. So two teams with a lot of familiarity with each other. As you mentioned, New England beat Buffalo. I believe it was 14-10, that incredibly windy day. And Buffalo played at a very high level, especially on offense, beat New England 33-21 a couple weeks later in New England. And now we have sort of the rubber match, if you will. I have to say, on paper, there's a lot you have to like if you're Buffalo in this game. New England looks like they'll be without Jalen Mills, who was put on the COVID list. We are taping this Thursday evening, so it is possible that he gets activated, though it seems unlikely. And if New England's down Jalen Mills, they're down 3 of their top 4 cornerbacks who were on their opening roster at the beginning of the season. No Gilmore, obviously. Jonathan Jones went on IR, out for the year. No Jalen Mills. And Miles Bryant will be put into a tough position. He's been their slot cornerback. McKenzie really played very well against him in their last meeting. Jojuan Williams, who despite being a second-round pick has been really up and down, frankly, more down since being drafted a couple years ago. He'd likely be playing a vast majority of snaps at the outside number 2 cornerback position. So you got to think if Buffalo executes at a high level, that they're going to win this game. That being said, it's tough to go against Belichick. And I know we kind of just put it out there, but you know he's going to have his players in the best position to win. Even in the game last time they played, Josh Allen almost threw an interception to J.C. Jackson that could have very well led to a New England victory. So I think Belichick is going to do enough to limit Buffalo's scoring and make they're going to need a couple key turnovers, which Josh Allen has been prone to do. Just look at the Atlanta game 1 week after playing lights out against New England. He threw 3 picks. Granted, they won the game. On the other side of the ball, New England's going to have to just win. They're going to have to win the line of scrimmage on both sides, but they're going to have to run the ball as effectively as they did when they were completely one-dimensional at Buffalo a month and a half ago. And Mac is obviously going to have some big-time throws. They can't win this game if they get behind early, like they have gotten behind in their 3 most recent losses against Buffalo, against Indy, and against Miami. They're going to have to play from ahead. They're going to have to control the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball. And maybe I'm a little biased, but I think they will do that. I think they're going to squeeze the game out in a nail biter, and I think a Josh Allen interception is going to be the difference.
I like all the points you make. You're right. If Josh Allen plays like, as they sometimes call him, MVP Josh Allen, not this year, but in the past, which he did in the second meeting, I think they can win. But I think the Patriots are going to dominate the line of scrimmage. I think they're going to have to have an incredible running game. I love Mac Jones, but he's kind of, I don't know if it's a rookie end of the season or he played against some really tough defenses. He did kind of regress with 2 big picks in each of those, the Indy loss and and of course the Bills loss. Having said that, I think they can dominate the line of scrimmage. I think they can run, and I think this is going to be the key to the game. And I just think it's going to be hard in his first playoff game to really expect Mac Jones to carry the load like it looked like he could for, maybe the 5 games or the 6 games or the 7 games during that winning streak. But they remind me a little bit of the 13-3 Rams game, where they're going to have to rely on defense and hopefully with a good rushing game. But But I also, the spread's 4. I like them with the points, but I like them to win the game outright because it's Bill Belichick for a third time. And I just think that's going to be very difficult. The other stat I wanted to give you, which I just heard today, was in games played in freezing temperature or below, 32 degrees or below, Josh Allen has the second worst completion percentage of any quarterback in the last 15 years. I don't know what the low number was, but he's played in a bunch of them in Buffalo. And he also had that very weird statement about his toes or something. And I'm not saying it's not true. I would ask, what would be the point of even telling anybody that, or maybe it's common knowledge. Maybe the Patriots can sack him and put ice cubes on his feet while he's down. I don't know. Just kidding. But yeah, I like the Patriots outright to win that game. Let's move now to San Francisco 49ers at Dallas. Dallas is a 3-point favorite, I think, as we're talking here on Thursday evening, as you said. Give me your thoughts on that game. They have to go down to AT&T, the bubble, the dome, et cetera, et cetera. But I was pretty impressed with the 49ers last week. What do you think?
Yeah, I'll take San Francisco in this game too, like the road underdogs. And I think different teams, but maybe a similar makeup, 49ers, New England, if you really think about it. Both physical teams that don't really rely on a passing game too much and run the ball really well. Deebo Samuel's maybe with Josh Allen, one of the 2 most versatile offensive players in the NFL. Have to give Allen credit with what he can do with his legs, but Samuel's absolutely amazing. And I think the Niners can control the line of scrimmage. They have recent postseason experience. They went to the Super Bowl a couple of years ago. And Dallas, do you trust Dak? Do you not trust Dak? Do you trust Dak more with the really good running game, which I guess they have this year? But it's just been really shaky. It's been really up and down. And what an offseason that'll be in Dallas and for Cowboys fans across the country if they don't get out of the first round this year. If you don't get out of the first round this year, when will you? So I like San Francisco in this game. I think they have a little bit, frankly, more postseason experience. And while they might not have as much pure talent, I think they have just as much, if not more, January football talent, even though this game will be played in a dome.
I agree with you. I don't think the Cowboys had as great a season as everybody thinks they do. When you look at their last, I think it was 4 of their last 5 games was in that division, which is not a very good division. The last game didn't even matter. They blew out the Eagles, I think, some absurd number. And I understand they were great offensively early on, but I don't think they were that great later on. And I got to say, we got to mention one of the best tight ends, certainly top 3, George Kittle. I think he's going to be tough to defend. Jimmy G made some great throws last week. I think they were opening the door to kick him out for Lance, but I think Jimmy G he's been in the Super Bowl. Granted, he didn't play well, but you're right. Teams like the Bucs and teams like San Francisco, the Eagles, not as much, but they do have that Super Bowl DNA where at least they've been there. And I certainly thought the Bucs were going to repeat this year and still may pick them to repeat, but I think a team like the 49ers, they're very physical, they're very hard-nosed, and I thought they really rose to the occasion against the Rams. Everybody and their mother was picking the Rams, but as I talked about with Joe Staszak, the 49ers have beaten the Rams the last 5 times they had played, and now they've beaten the Rams the last 6 times that they've played. That's not an accident, and I know you can tell me matchups and everything, but I'm not sold on Dallas. And the other thing I'd say about Dallas is the Arizona Cardinals, who are, I don't really like in the playoffs, but they were 1-4 of their last 5, and the one was against Dallas. They barely won, but they beat Dallas. So you're losing to a team that lost every other game they played in the month of December. And I think that counts for a lot. Playing in the NFC East does not get you playoff ready, in my opinion. So I'm with you. I'm taking the points, but I also think the 49ers outright. We'll look at one more game, and then we'll talk about big picture, maybe just a Super Bowl selection from the get-go. So we're on record.
You want to go Tampa, Philly, or you want to go Kansas City, Pittsburgh?
Um, I'll go both quickly. Why don't you go Tampa, Philly, and then I'll go Kansas City, Pittsburgh.
Yeah, I think you know, Philly at Tampa. I fully expect Tampa to win. It's hard to imagine Tom Brady losing a first round playoff game at home against a 9-8 team that either hasn't beaten a single playoff team or hasn't beaten a playoff team since the beginning of the season. I'm not sure with the entire.
That's correct. They're 0-5. No, they're 0-5 against teams in the playoffs.
There are a few factors that make me think on paper this could be slightly more interesting than you would expect. First of all, we talked a lot about weather with regards to the Bills game. Right now, what they're expecting in Tampa are potentially pretty bad rain and wind. And Philly loves to run the ball. And if it's pretty bad rain and wind, Tampa's only played in that one time this year was up in New England, where there was a lot of factors going into play. But the passing, Brady in the passing game didn't exactly play very well. Even if there is a good amount of rain and wind, I still really like Tampa. It's going to be fascinating because Tampa for about 2.5 years had far and away the #1 rush defense in football. Nobody would even think about running the ball on them. Even when you knew they were going to pass, you tried to run the ball on them, you couldn't. They've been exposed a little bit the last half of the year, dropped down to #3 in the NFL. But I think yards per carry were very far down the last half of the year. They're getting Shaq Barrett and JPP back, who even if they're not at 100%, and JPP hasn't been for a while, are really good at setting the edge. And what teams have done really effectively is it's not like they're running through Vita Vea and Ndamukong Suh up the middle, because those guys could be in their 40s. You're not going to run on them up the middle. They need their veteran players back to set the edge. Levante David's still a question mark. I do think if Tampa gets through this and they stay relatively healthy, which they haven't in weeks, I really like them going forward, and we'll talk about that as well. So I fully expect them to win, but if the weather is what it's supposed to be, and the Eagles do know, as you've said in the past, they kind of turn these games into a scrum. Granted, not against playoff teams, but they turn these games into a scrum. It could actually be interesting to watch Sunday at 1 p.m. So we'll see.
Yeah, I'll just say I'm going to take. I like Tampa to win, but I'm going to take the Eagles with the points. It's one of those games you can see they're up 15 late in the fourth quarter. They kind of let their guard down, and Hurts runs around in for 42 yards or whatever. But Hurts is a better player, and the Eagles are a better team, obviously, when they played earlier in the year. But I agree with you. I'll go quickly on Kansas City, then ask you for a comment. I think this is blowout city. I think the Steelers, they had a 10% chance to make the playoffs going into the last weekend, and they made the playoffs. It happens once in a while. But the Chiefs, although I thought they were lucky early in that crazy winning streak they had, beating the Giants 20-17 when 25 teams would have beaten them. And then the next week they got the Aaron Rodgers COVID miss game, and they won 13-7. So they were lucky. But after that, I think they're almost clicking on all cylinders. Not quite. Their defense has played well. I don't know who the brain surgeon was who put Chris Jones on the outside early in the season. I don't know how that happened. Then they moved him to the inside where he had played the last few years, and then he became Chris Jones again. And they got Spags who loves to blitz. Big Ben, this probably is his last game. Although I would say the Steelers, to me, used to turn games into scrum as well. I think they're lucky to be there. I don't know if Roethlisberger's comments were, tongue in cheek, we have no chance. But I think he's right. If he was serious, I think they have no chance. And I think this is time for Kansas City playoff time. Mahomes becoming a little more patient. I think this game, unlike the other three we talked about, is a blowout. So give me a quick one on that game, and then give me your overall Super Bowl pick.
Yeah, you think in a way that maybe even though they dominated them a couple weeks ago, the Kansas City offense versus Pittsburgh defense matchup could be interesting, especially considering Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce are banged up. Be interesting to see if they try and manage their minutes as well. It's not like they'd sit them, but you likely have tougher games coming up. The problem for Pittsburgh is, they scored 13 points in regulation last week against a practice squad secondary in Baltimore. They couldn't move the ball at all against Kansas City the first time they played them. Big Ben just doesn't have it quite that much unless they somehow develop a considerable rushing attack. I don't see how this game isn't a blowout. There have been teams that have been 14+ point underdogs and won in the playoffs. We can name a couple of those. Hard to see that happening in Arrowhead this Sunday.
Okay, give me your Super Bowl selection, your AFC, NFC winners, and they play in the Super Bowl. Who do you have this year?
Yeah, I started the year with a pretty boring selection of a rematch of last year's Super Bowl, though I guess it shouldn't be boring because I can't remember when the last time that happened. It's been forever. So I took Tampa over Kansas City, and I don't see a reason to change. Both are 2 seeds. Kansas City, I believe, is the favorite to come out of the AFC. Tennessee and Buffalo, I think, match up really well against them. Buffalo, if Allen's playing at a high level, they would match up in the second round if Buffalo beats New England and Kansas City wins as a 2-3 game. But, you know, I have to say, you just kind of have to go with Mahomes until he shows you that he can't do it. He's only been beaten in the AFC coming out of the playoffs once. And it's a game where he scored 31 points in the second half against the Bill Belichick coach defense. So it's kind of like until it happens, at least in the AFC playoff picture, it's hard to bet against it. Though Tennessee, if Derrick Henry comes back, talk about a physical team at the line of scrimmage. That would be a great AFC championship game, Chiefs at Titans, if that happens. In the NFC, you kind of, even though Tampa's been injured, to me, you get the sense they've started to distance themselves from all the non-Green Bay teams. I don't really see Dallas, LA, the Cardinals. No, San Francisco actually would be interesting, but I think San Francisco, if they win, is going to play Green Bay because of the seeding, unless somehow Philly beat Tampa. So I don't really see those teams going into Tampa. That's why this 2 seed was so important. If you told me Tampa had to go to LA because if the Rams had held on, then I'm like, well, that's a great game. I'm not sure who to pick. But I really like Tampa. And then the big question is, first of all, if you like the Niners to beat Dallas, I think you got to think about the Niners to beat Green Bay in the second round. That's over a week away, and we'll see if that happens. But Green Bay struggled with San Francisco, remember 2 years ago, and there's a lot of similarities still between the 2 teams. But if you sort of expect that it could be an NFC Championship rematch between Tampa and Green Bay, I'm going to have to go with Tampa. Aaron Rodgers 1-4 in NFC Championship games, 0-4 in his last 4. His unbelievable second to none touchdown to interception ratio completely evaporates in those 5 games. He's pretty much 1-to-1. And at the end of the day, Tom Brady threw you 3 second-half interceptions in last year's NFC Championship game, and you still couldn't beat the Bucs. Do I think Green Bay is better? I thought they sort of peaked after last year, and I'll admit their running attack is a little bit better. Their defense, especially their run defense, has looked suspect of late, which is why that potential Niners-Packers matchup is so interesting. But I think by that point, Tampa will be, unless they keep getting destroyed with injuries, which they probably won't get to the NFC Championship game if that happens, but they should be healthier. And I like TB12 and the Battle of 12s if those 2 match up again, kind of like Mahomes, but even more so. You can't bet against him until he really shows you that you should. So I wouldn't bet against Tom. And then in the Super Bowl, I like Tampa a lot. I think even though it won't be 31-9 if those 2 teams meet again, I think Kansas City's offense has been fairly inconsistent this year. Their defense has tailed off a little bit. And I think you just like Brady with the momentum, and he's much more comfortable in this offense. Just look at his statistics to show you why.
Yeah, I think Mike Evans and Gronk are going to have to come up real big time. Although he's got a little chemistry with some of these other guys now, but I think it might be Gronk's playoff myself. I picked the same thing at the beginning of the year as you, so I don't know if this is getting boring. But I will say, they went up to Green Bay and beat them last year, and I don't see that much of a difference. Everybody's kind of, think about Green Bay. They get the bye, and that's the biggest thing in the world, and there's only one now. But then if things go the way we think they're going to go, if you have to play the 49ers in Tampa Bay, that's one of the toughest roads, I think, for a team with a bye ever to get to a Super Bowl. So I don't quite buy into that they're that much better. And again, you've got, I know the big story was, and we relied on it, all 22 starters from a Super Bowl team were coming back for the first time in like forever, back to the 70s or something. And yes, no Godwin. Yes, it's too bad they'd be imploded for whatever reason, because boy, they could have really used him. But that's how many weapons Brady has. That's why he could throw for 5,300 yards and put everybody in their rearview mirror, in his rearview mirror. So I hope they're healthy. If those guys can set the edge, then they have they'll beat I think they're going to beat the Eagles anyway, but it'll be a different Jalen Hurts. And I just think they can go to Green Bay. They did it last year. Why can't they do it this year? Their team as a team maybe is a little short offensively on weapons. I hope David gets healthy because they really, really, really need him. But Fournette's coming back, as you know. So I think, and he's a big weapon out of the backfield, catching and running, of course. So I kind of agree with you on the Chiefs. They won't have Bill Belichick to deal with Mahomes, but as you said, he scored 31 against them the one time he got beat in the second half after getting shut out, I think, for like one of the only times in the first half. So I'm with you on that. Tampa Bay over the Chiefs in this year's Super Bowl. Any final words?
No, hey, you never know. New England could travel to Mahomes for the AFC Championship game. That's the only way it would happen. But that'd be an interesting one. We'll see if that could.
I give them a chance if they get that far, and I hope they do. This has been Steve Kallas speaking of sports, along with Johnnie Kallas. We'll see you the next time.